Welcome back to No Recipes, where we elevate everyday meals using tried and true techniques. I'm Mark Matsumoto, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make the best apple pie ever. Seriously, I've been blogging for 10 years, but I haven't shared this recipe with you guys yet because it's kind of a family secret. But today, I'm going to let you guys in on it. It's not the prettiest looking pie ever, but with a flaky all butter crust holding together a huge mound of sweet autumn apples, it's hard to beat on flavor. Are you with me? Let's get started.
To keep my flour fresh, I like to store mine in the freezer. It also makes it a lot easier to make flaky pie crust when your flour is ice cold. For our ingredients, we're gonna make our crust using the frozen flour, cold cultured butter that's been cut into half-inch cubes, flaky sea salt, and ice water. For the filling, we have a bunch of Fuji apples, which I like using because they have a great balance of tartness, sweetness, and apple flavor. We're also going to be using a lemon, raw sugar, potato starch, nutmeg that we're going to grind ourselves, and ground cinnamon. For the wash, we have an egg yolk, cream, and a pinch of salt. Let's start by making the crust. I'm gonna add the frozen flour to a bowl, and then the frozen butter, and finally the sea salt. Now, we're just gonna use a fork to smash the butter. The idea is to press the butter through the tines of a fork to get thin flakes of butter. Because the flakes of butter end up separating layers within the dough, you end up with an ultra flaky crust. This is the secret to making flaky pie crust. As a perfectionist, I know it's tempting to try and get the mixture uniform, but as long as you don't have any cubes of butter left, you want the mixture to be a bit ragged looking. This is also the reason why I don't recommend using a food processor to make pie crust, as it tends to incorporate the butter too evenly. Using a fork does take a bit of elbow grease, and you can make things a bit easier using a pastry blender, but personally, I think a fork produces the flakiest crust. Oh, and if you're wondering why I didn't freeze the butter too, it's because pressing frozen butter through a fork is kinda like trying to press a raw carrot through a strainer. I didn't want to make you sit through all of this, but it should end up looking kind of like this. Now, we just have to add some ice water, a few tablespoons at a time, until the dough just barely starts to come together. Be careful not to add too much water at once, because you can always add more water, but you can't take water away. Make sure you don't heat up the dough too much with your hands, or overwork it, or all that hard work you put into flaking that butter will be for nothing. When you can squeeze a handful of dough together with your hand, it's ready. Now, you just want to divide the dough up in half, pressing each half into a disc wrapped in plastic wrap. Again, be sure you don't overwork the dough. You should still be able to see the butter marbled in swirls throughout the dough. While the dough chills, let's make the filling. I'm gonna add some potato starch to the sugar, as well as some cinnamon. And then I'm gonna grate in some whole nutmeg. I like to grate my own nutmeg because it's one of those spices that loses its fragrance very quickly once ground. Now we just need to mix everything together. If you can't find potato starch, tapioca starch or arrowroot starch will work, but I don't recommend using cornstarch. Now you just want to squeeze about 3 tablespoons of lemon juice so you have it ready to coat the apples. For the apples, you want to peel them first. Most apple pie recipes call for using a mix of green apples for the tartness and texture, and sweet, fragrant apples for the flavor. I like using Fuji apples because they have a good balance of sweetness and acidity, they hold up well when cooked, and they're brimming with apple flavor. I do add a bit of extra lemon juice to compensate for the fact that they're not quite as tart as green apples. I don't know if it's just me, but there's something really satisfying about getting the peel off in one piece. Once your apples are peeled, you want to quarter them. Then we're going to remove the core from each quarter. Be sure to sprinkle a bit of lemon juice on your apples as you go to keep them from oxidizing. Now we just want to slice each quarter into 3 slices and do this with the rest of your apples. Okay, our apples are prepared, and I'm just going to pour the rest of the lemon juice on the apples and toss them around to coat them evenly. Then we're going to add the sugar and spices and stir that around until the apples are evenly coated with the mixture. I don't own a bowl that's large enough to mix all the apples at once, so I separated this into 2 different bowls. Now we just need to make the egg wash for the crust. I'm going to add some cream into the egg yolk, and then we're going to add a pinch of salt. Then you want to stir this together with a spoon. I don't recommend using a whisk for this because you don't want to form bubbles. Now it's time to roll out the dough. Set the chilled dough on a well-floured surface, and then we want to roll it out into a round that's slightly bigger than our pie plate. Be sure to keep your rolling pin and all your surfaces well floured to keep the dough from sticking. I don't really bake too often, so this isn't exactly my strong suit, but I can say that this does get easier with experience. As we roll the dough out, those flakes of butter we worked so hard on are getting rolled into super thin leaves of fat that are spreading between layers of dough. As the crust bakes, the butter's gonna melt, creating puffy layers of pie crust, which is why it ends up so flaky. Okay, our dough is now just a little bit larger than our pie plate. Now we just have to get the dough into the plate. But I forgot to continue dusting the bottom of the crust with flour, so it's stuck to the counter a little bit. This is where my trusty pastry scraper swoops in to save the day. I'm a big fan of Gear's kitchen products, and this flexible silicone blade comes in really handy here. They're not paying me to say anything, but I love their colorful products, and I'll include a link to this scraper in the description below. Once you get your dough rolled up onto the rolling pin, it makes it a lot easier to transfer it over to the pie plate. Okay, we've got the dough in the pie plate, and we just need to patch up a few gaps and tears. You want to avoid having any holes in the bottom of your crust, otherwise you're going to have some major juice leakage as your pie bakes. Now I'm just going to load the bottom crust up with all the apples. You want to arrange them a bit so you don't have any apples sticking up at odd angles that's going to puncture our top crust. Be sure to pour those collected juices over the apples. Okay, we're ready to start on our top crust. This is basically the same process as the bottom crust, but this time I'm going to be stopping periodically to spread some flour underneath so it doesn't stick to the counter like it did the last time. Okay, that's not quite round, but I don't want to roll the dough any thinner. So let's get this on the pie and we can patch her up later. You can't really see it from this angle, but the mound of apples is coming a good 4 inches above the rim of the plate. So we're gonna have to do a bit of patchwork to fully cover the pie. Just trim bits of crust from areas that have too much and use it to patch the areas that don't have enough. Think of it as being Robin Hood for pie. Now we just have to seal the edges. I like to tuck the excess dough under the bottom crust, which prevents waste and it creates a nice tight seal. Then, I just go around and flute the edges with my fingers. You can use a fork or spoon to do this, but just make sure you get a nice tight seal. Okay, I think we're good. So now we just have to apply the egg wash. But I just realized I threw out my pastry brushes when I moved. It's not ideal, but I'm gonna go ahead and apply the wash to my pie using a paper towel that's been folded up. The egg wash does two things. The first is that it gives our top crust a stunning lacquered finish. The second thing is that the wash helps the sugar that we're about to sprinkle on adhere to the crust. Now I'm just gonna sprinkle about a tablespoon of coarse raw sugar on top. This adds some nice sweetness to the crust while adding a great texture with every bite. Cut some holes on top to vent steam, and then we can toss the pie onto a baking sheet in an oven that's been preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit or about 190 Celsius. Here's a time lapse of the pie baking up. The edges got a bit dark because I got a little too much egg wash on them, but it's not burnt and it's gonna taste amazing. Okay, let's get that pie out of there and let it cool down. You wanna let your pie cool completely before slicing into it, otherwise it's gonna fall apart. Ooh, listen to the sound of that crust. This all butter crust is light and flaky with bursts of sweet sugar crystals on top. It's pretty darn good on its own, but add to that the sweet, tangy apple filling, and this right here is straight up heaven. Although I recommend letting the pie cool completely before you try and cut it, you can heat it up again if you plan on serving it with ice cream. It's also good with a dollop of sweetened creme fraiche or a big cloud of loosely whipped cream. Well, that's it for this time, but enjoy the holidays and hit that link in the description for my full recipe. Also, be sure to give us a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss my next delicious video. See you next week!